Most people don't lose their integrity all at once. They lose it at threshold, in an argument, in a moment of urgency, in a room where everyone else is saying yes. Pressure doesn't destroy character, it reveals what governs it. I'm Kaye McLeod, and this is Integrity Under Pressure, a podcast about self governance, consequence literacy, and how to protect your integrity when willpower isn't enough. Because integrity isn't a personality trait, it's a governance skill. Most people believe breakthroughs create permanent change. They don't. In fact, breakthroughs are often where people make some of their worst decisions. Not because breakthroughs are bad, but because of the state they create. A peak state feels like clarity, it feels like truth, it feels like certainty. And when a human being feels those three things at the same time, they become extremely persuasive to themselves. They believe what they are feeling must be real. But the problem with peak states is simple. They are temporary, and temporary states make terrible governors. You see, people making decisions in these states constantly. Someone attends a conference and decide they're about to rebuild their entire career. Someone hears a motivational talk and commits to waking up at 5 a.m. every single day. Someone has a powerful argument with their partner and decides the relationship is over. In that moment, the decision feels completely clear. But clarity produced by intensity is not always clarity. Sometimes it is simply adrenaline wearing a very convincing suit. You've probably seen this pattern. Someone attends a seminar or a boot camp or an online challenge. They leave convinced their life has completely changed. They feel lighter, they feel clearer, more certain about who they're about to become. They tell their friends, this is the moment everything shifts, right? And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, it feels true. Then the state fades, life returns, the nervous system settles, and the old pattern quietly walks back in like it never left. People usually interpret this as failure, but it isn't failure, it's physics. Because emotion can ignite a moment, but emotion cannot install structure. And structure is what makes change survive ordinary life. And this pattern shows up in more places than people realize. Someone listens to a powerful podcast and decide tomorrow morning they are becoming a completely different person. Someone reads a book that feels like it explains their entire life and suddenly believes they've solved themselves. The insight feels enormous, but the nervous system that has to live the next week hasn't changed yet. The habits are the same, the environment is the same, the structure is the same. So the emotional moment fades and the person quietly concludes something must be wrong with them. But nothing is wrong with them. They simply mistook intensity for transformation. I learned this the expensive way. Years ago, I attended a boot camp for coaches. The environment was intense. You know, we got music, energy is high, everyone sharing their stories, people crying, people declaring the lives they were about to build. The room was electric. And somewhere inside that atmosphere, I started crying. Not quietly, I mean, really crying. The kind of crying that makes you believe something deep inside you has finally broken open. In that moment, it felt like everything had changed. I felt clear, I felt strong, I felt certain. And when the program they were selling was offered, I bought it without hesitation because in that moment, it felt obvious. Of course, this was the next step. Of course, this was what I needed. Of course, this was going to change everything. And then I went home. The room disappeared, the music disappeared, the energy disappeared, the people disappeared, and the state disappeared. What remained was me, my same habits, my same patterns, my same nervous system, my same internal structure, and the truth showed up very quietly. Nothing had actually changed, not because the moment was fake, but because the moment was emotional. And emotion is not governance. When the high wore off, something else appeared: regret. Not dramatic regret, just the quiet recognition that I had made a structural decision while emotionally elevated. I had made a long term commitment from a temporary state. And when the state left, the decision had nowhere stable to live. This is what I call the peak state trap. This is also the moment most people misunderstand. They think the breakthrough failed. They think the program didn't work. They think they lacked discipline. But the real issue usually appeared much earlier. The decision was made inside a temporary state. Peak states feel like clarity. But from a neuroscience perspective, peak emotional states actually narrow perception. When the brain experiences intense emotion, excitement, inspiration, even euphoria, the limbic system becomes dominant. The part of the brain responsible for long term planning becomes quieter, which is why intense emotional states often feel powerful in the moment but unstable later. Your brain is optimized for immediate action, not long term stability, which explains why commitments made during emotional highs often become heavy once ordinary life returns. Peak states compress time. The present moment feels enormous, the future feels simple. And when the future feels simple, commitment feels easy. But Tuesday morning always arrives eventually. And Tuesday morning is where decisions have to live. Think about how often humans say this sentence: this is the moment everything changes. You hear it at conferences. You hear it after powerful books. You hear it after emotional conversations. And sometimes you hear it in your own head. I know I have. Humans are extremely good at making decisions in moments they later have to live with. The moment feels permanent, but the state producing it is temporary, which is why breakthroughs rarely produce lasting change. Because breakthroughs create state, but they rarely install structure. And without structure, the nervous system returns to its original pattern. That's not weakness, that's regulation. Your system always returns to what it knows how to maintain, which is why most decision failures are not moral failures, they are state failures. The decision itself may not have been wrong, but the state it was made in was unstable. And unstable states produce unstable commitments. And this is also why outsourcing authority is so dangerous, because big states often convince people that someone else has the answer. The guru, the program, the book, the motivational speaker, the moment becomes intoxicating. And when people feel that intensely, they often hand their authority away. They say, this person knows something I don't. Or, this system will fix me. This program will change my life. But external intensity cannot replace internal governance. No program can make decisions for you. No guru can install your standards. No emotional moment can stabilize your nervous system permanently. Only structure can do that. And structure is quiet. It doesn't come with music, it doesn't come with applause, it doesn't come with tears. It comes with repetition, with standards, with the slow installation of internal authority, which is much less exciting than a breakthrough, but infinitely more reliable. This is the difference between inspiration and governance. Inspiration raises your state, Governance installs your structure, and structure is what carries you when inspiration disappears. Breakthroughs are not useless, they can reveal something, they can expose a pattern, they can show you a version of yourself you haven't met yet. But breakthrough is not the change. The breakthrough is the signal. What matters is what you build after the signal. Did you install structure? Or do you chase the next emotional high? Because chasing emotional highs can become its own addiction. People move from seminar to seminar, program to program, coach to coach, looking for the next moment that feels like transformation. But feeling transformed is not the same as becoming governed. Governance happens in quieter places, in the moment someone pauses instead of reacting, in the moment someone notices they are emotionally elevated and decides not to commit yet, in the moment someone realizes motivation is high and chooses to wait until the state settles before making a structural decision. That pause is not hesitation, it is governance. Because governance means your decisions are not controlled by the loudest moment in the room. They are controlled by the standards you installed before the moment arrived. And that difference is what separates inspiration from authority. So if you've ever had a breakthrough moment that didn't stick, you didn't fail. You experienced a peak state. The real question is what happened afterward. Did the moment install structure, or did it simply create a temporary emotional high? Because the goal isn't to avoid powerful experiences. The goal is to stop making permanent decisions inside temporary states. And the real question underneath all of this is simple. When the emotional high fades, what structure remains to govern your next decision? If this episode did anything, let it be this. You saw the pattern. Pressure is not the problem. The question is whether you govern yourself inside it. Hold that and decide what you're no longer willing to do on autopilot. Because integrity isn't a personality trait, it's a governance skill. I'll see you on the next episode.